Attention, please. Eastern Airlines Flight 19, now ready for departure.
Welcome aboard the Walt Disney World Express Monorail. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're entering the vacation kingdom of the world.
There's enough land here to hold all the ideas and plans we could possibly imagine. We call it Epcot. Will be our experimental prototype city of tomorrow.
Welcome to another episode of the Retro Disney World Podcast, taking you back to the vacation kingdom of the world, the way it was, and the way it is in your memories.
All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Retro Disney World Podcast. This is episode 23, titled Carousel of Progress, where we'll be taking you back to the history of the attraction and going through all the different acts, and we'll be doing that shortly. I'm your host, Todd McCartney, and with me, as always, tonight is Brian P. Miles. How you doing tonight, Brian?
Greetings from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
JT Kuzier.
Hello, how we doing?
Good, getting through. And Hal Bowers. How's it going, Hal?
Good. Welcome to from sunny Florida, except it's nighttime, so it's not sunny.
But it's still warmer than here. So.
Oh, much warmer.
We'll find out soon.
That's right. We're all
that's right. When you're in Florida,
we're gonna find. All of us are gonna find out.
Be in the same state once. Finally,
when you need it bad, they've got it good. That was the Florida tourism.
That's right.
That's horrible. 79, 80.
That's so true.
That's right.
I do need it bad. So November
will all be there for Destination D, and obviously also our special Lake and Lagoon tour. We'll talk about that a little bit later in some more detail as well. So, but as always, we like to roll the clocks back on this show, and we go back to last month with some comments and corrections. And how we were unsure of where Captain Jack's restaurant name came from. And Foxy did write in, and it looks like Foxy said that the name of the establishment paid tribute to Jack Olson, who ran Disneyland's merchandise department from 1964 to 1970. So he retired from Walt Disney World in 1977, but it's pretty likely that since he contributed a lot to the shopping locations and antiques in Liberty Square, that was a nod to him.
Well, how cool is that?
Yeah. Solving mysteries 1 month at a time. So, also going back to last month when we talked about Toys Fantastique, I still can't say it after a month of it. Eric Smith wrote into us and saying that the Toy Store sold Lego products for a while, but then they switched to Tente, T-E-N-T-E, from Spain. That was about the time that Lego started hitting the U.S. heavily. So, still bringing in European. And do you guys ever remember Tente? Or Tente?
No, I never heard of them.
I had one. I had this battleship. The studs had holes in them on the top. It was really kind of interesting. It's a different design, but they certainly kind of a Lego knockoff. So
Tente.
Brian, we also got some more information about one of the shops.
Yeah, the Crystal Art Shop. We talked about the Erebus brothers on the last show, and we were unclear on exactly where they had come from, although I was certain that they dated back to Walt and in Disneyland. Turns out I was correct. Walt met them at the World's Fair in 1964, and he met them in the Spanish Pavilion. They were representing their homeland, and he said, I got to have a shop in Disneyland, and that shop opened in Sleeping Beauty Castle in Anaheim in 1967. And it has began a long and exclusive partnership between the Erebus brothers and Disney. There are currently 19 different shops scattered throughout Disney parks worldwide.
Yeah, I mean, I remember going in there, and they had the glass rods, and they had the blow torches set up, and they'd be sitting there, and giant castle, and all sorts of cool stuff. And your mind would be baffled at the price tag and all the
They
zeros.
blew out a giant castle? Like, I'm being serious. Like, was it like multiple pieces, or was it?
It was a giant crystal castle. I mean, that thing was over a foot tall, I think. It was
They still have them in
but not
some
nearly
of the
as.
shops.
I remember there was a big one. It was like $20,000.
Well, there's the glass guy on Main Street now. Was that
is,
their?
Yeah, that's theirs.
Oh,
yeah,
same. Yeah, okay, yeah. Because it's always like the same guy, I feel like, and then interesting. Well, that's cool.
So for those of you listened to episode 22.5, which was our interview with David Coolidge, he also mentioned that a lot of these shops that were in there, what happened was with the success of Mary Poppins, there was a lot of money that was overseas from the film success, and in order to bring some of those different wares and products back, they bought a lot of the merchandise in from overseas, and then that was just on sale in a lot of these shops in Lake Buena Vista. So David brought us a lot of interesting information, and if you take a listen to the podcast, you can actually also listen to him tell the story that in one of the shops at Lake Buena Vista, as he was standing there, they were working on a gift, and that gift turned out to be for a very special person. So take a listen, and it's a pretty neat story that he's got for us. So, all right, with that said, JT, let's take a look at the listener mailbag this month. What do we have? We had a lot come in, as always.
Yeah, some different stuff here. Pretty good month. I think the last month got us a pretty good clip of mail. Lincoln Brown wrote us, and he loves the podcast and the site since his memories go back into the early 70s and early 80s. Says he still has some of those old photos from trips, and at any rate, I figured you might be the people to ask this question to. So here's his question. There are many biographies of Walt Disney out there. Which of those is the most historically accurate and reliable? And then he wanted to add, too, that he remembers the Magic Shop, the Penny Arcade, dioramas on Main Street, and riding with the pilot on the monorail. We all remember that. So what's the most historically accurate Walt Disney biography book out there? You guys have any tips for him?
Well, I can't specifically recommend one because there are so many of them. I do think that the most valuable thing to do if you want to learn about Walt is reading the books of the people who worked with him. I mean, a lot of the Imagineers, a lot of the artists have written books, especially the ones that are older and dying off now. But over the decades, there have been a lot of books written by people that worked with him. And I always think you should start there. I will also say that the Disney family, even though the Disney company sells the Neil Gabler biography in park stores and on property, the Disney family was not happy with that and not happy at all with a lot of the stuff that was in it, and said it was inaccurate. So take that, for what it's worth. I'm sorry, I'm not giving you a direct answer, but I think those are things that you should take into account when you're reading about them.
I've read a couple of them. I haven't read all of them, and there's bits and pieces of different ones that I think are interesting, but like everything, I think you have to kind of take everything with a grain of salt. I don't know if there's one definitive, well-written one.
There's the question, when are they going to make the Walt biography movie? Do you think it'll ever happen?
There was a movie made not too long ago, and I know I saw it. So in the show notes, we'll get the title of it up. But it chronicles Walt and Roy from birth until the founding of the studios.
Was that the one, Walt before Mickey or something like that?
That's it. Something like that, yeah.
And, I'd like to see one that's in that era, Disneyland to, that chunk.
Yeah, I'd love to see one in the same era as Saving Mr. Banks that wasn't 90% made up, like Saving Mr. Banks.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah. All right. So thanks, Lincoln. Appreciate that. The next one, this one really was I love this. We got a tweet from Senior Peanut. Is that right? Senior Peanut.
That's the best handle on.
Yeah. All right, Senior Peanut. Well, he sent us a link to pictures of, this is the same one that we got, Pablo Escobar on his 1981 trip to Disney World, right?
Yep.
And I was just loving it because it's just so I don't know. I just think it's so funny seeing Pablo Escobar chilling out in Frontierland or just. It's
the picture of, for those of you who don't know, Pablo Escobar was a drug lord, and before he was targeted and eventually captured, he took his family to Disney World in 1981, and there's a great picture of him sitting on this bench. It looks like his daughter's got the gun in her hand, and the other kid's got another gun. She's ready to fire, but apparently they spent tons and tons of money filling suitcases with souvenirs and clothing. He hired a personal person to advise him on attractions, escort a driver. So it's kind of interesting, but there's a handful of pictures out there. So
We should
tweet it out.
reenact those pictures in November. I'll sit there and just Escobar it. So he set foot in Walt Disney World in 1981. Pretty crazy. He didn't hit up Epcot. Epcot was what, 82?
Yeah.
Yeah, he didn't. It was too soon. He might have overlooked the construction of Epcot. That's all. All right, next one here, and this is another tweet. Is this Drunk at Disney tweeted at us?
Yep.
That's fun. I like to follow. They're interesting. Said, does anyone know when they stopped using World Key? Ooh, anybody know? Rough idea?
I'm being quiet to wait and see how.
Yeah, I'm trying to get some confirmation because so the big interventions makeover was what, 94?
Well,
94.
Yeah.
94.
And it existed
94
for a
was
while so they moved it from Spaceship Earth to the outside wall of the guest services build, and it stayed there for a couple of years. And then suddenly it was gone. So
I would put it at like 97, maybe 96.
So
Maybe not even.
mid 1990s would be the safest answer to give you.
But I'm going to find out for sure.
Yeah. So we'll revisit that one in the next episode and get you.
Yeah, I'll get a definitive
exact
answer.
digit. So.
All right. Well, that's our World Key rough idea. So that'll give you a start. All right, next one we had Jason McMahon writes us. I was wondering if you knew anything about ordering Disney Park souvenirs through WDW mail order. When did it start? When did they start and stop printing catalogs? He says he's seen 2 catalogs from 85 and 87. So what do you got for us, Brian? I know you replied to this one.
I did, because the catalogs, if you go out and collect them from the 80s and early 90s, have a lot of really cool Epcot merchandise and park merchandise. It's great for confirming when you see something cool on eBay or at a yard sale, saying, when did they sell this? So that those catalogs are great for that. But they started, so my answer to him was, there was always an ability to pick up the phone and call them and say, hey, my nephew came home with this really neat Donald Duck inflatable such and such. Can I have one sent to me? Pretty much from park opening. It was always a service-oriented company, so you always had the ability to call and have them ship you merchandise. It gained more notoriety and as a practice when Birnbaum started printing their official guides to Disney. They started including that information in there, including the contact information. Within that first couple of years, Disney then, right after Epcot opened, they started putting out their own merchandise catalogs, small at first. And then, of course, through the merchandising explosion in the 80s and early 90s, they got to be quite voluminous. Then the Disney stores opened. And the catalogs continued to get sent out up until around, and I kind of put it at around 2000, although that's a very general. Once it became possible to sell over the internet, eventually, like most other catalogs, it was sunset. And so they don't produce them anymore. But they were around pretty much for the 80s and 90s. With the opening of Epcot, merchandising really took a front seat. And that's kind of when they spread. So that was about the time frame was early 80s to late 90s or right around 2000.
So one of the things that people don't know about that whole merchandise catalog thing is it actually dates back to Disneyland. And that was one of Walt's ideas and is actually in the original Disneyland Foundation documents. So when he came out with the idea and went out to sell it to the banks, that concept of having merchandise from vendor partners available to call, that was right there from day one in 1955.
What is this place? What is it that you do here? Merchandising.
Merchandising? What's that?
Merchandising! Where the real money from the movie is made.
It always cracks me up because people always are like, oh, well, Walt really didn't care about money. It's like, no, he was a smart guy. He was not going to let an opportunity go like that.
All right. Thank you, Jason. Appreciate your message. And if you have any listener mail questions, comments, you want to know something, maybe we can dig it up for you, email us podcast@retrodisneyworld.com.
All right, thanks, JT. So let's move on to this month's Audio Rewind. How many of you guys got it this month?
Yeah, I think I got close. I was, starting to think, because I actually did ride this back when it was around.
Brian, I think you knew it, right? I know Hal did.
Yeah. So for the amount of time that you stood in that line.
You knew
forever. For some reason, if you had wings, would load in like a matter of minutes. But if you could fly, it was like a 60-minute line, no matter what.
Exactly. So let's take a listen to last month's Audio Rewind. All right, so if you send in your answer and you guessed Delta Dreamflight, you were correct. And we do have a winner for last month. His name is Robert Burke. Congratulations, Robert.
You won the
Progress Land brochure that Ted Leinhart donated to us, so we'll get that right out to you. And we got to come up with a prize for this month, and we also have to come up with an item for the prize pot. Guys, I actually have both this month. So we had another listener write in, and they sent to us, hey, I've got some extra brochures and vacation packages and guides and all sorts of maps. I'd like to send it to you. So David Bell sent us this awesome collection of brochures and vacation guides. We're going to give that away this month, and he's sent us so much that we can probably do this for 2 months. There's plenty of them here, dating back to around the 20th anniversary and the Good Housekeeping. This is great. A 20th anniversary guide to Walt Disney World by Good Housekeeping. And there's even, it looks like there's some mayonnaise coupons inside too. You might be
mayonnaise coupons?
I think they're still good.
Yeah, there's a recipe on the back for Crisco cranberry swirl muffins. They've even got they have a half price for Birnbaum's 20th anniversary Walt Disney World edition. So look at that.
Look out.
A lot of good stuff. So that's going to be this month's prize, and I do have an item for the prize pot. Now, for those who are not familiar, the prize pot is ever growing. Every month we put one item into the prize pot, and at the end of the year, everybody who has entered the Audio Rewind, we're going to pick one random name, and they're going to win the entire prize pot. Now, JT, you've got this all written down on a piece of paper. You had to use the other side. Let's run down for listeners where we stand with this, because we only have a couple months left.
Yeah, we're getting there. Wow. Okay, here we go. An Orange Bird Yo-Yo, the World of Motion brochure, the Golf Resort golf bag tag, the Epcot Salt and Pepper shaker, the Disney World glass candy dish, the Tomorrowland manual, the 1984 Disney News magazine, the Walt Disney World Explorer CD-ROM, the expired Discovery Island tickets, and the Frontierland Viewmaster Slide.
Exactly. So this month, guys, here's what I'm going to add. And I actually have two items. First of all, we have the Walt Disney World Tencenial Coin that was given out to the employees and the cast members. This special coin is being presented to you for helping to make Walt Disney World what it is today. So we've got that. And also, just in case you're going to walk around, survey any land, or do any work, we have a Walt Disney World Pocket Protector.
No way.
Put that right in your breast pocket and keep all your pens and your papers and everything nearby.
Can I wear that in November?
You can wear it into Epcot and then ask a cast member, hey, where's the science stuff?
Looking for the teacher center.
With that, we need an Audio Rewind for this month. So let's take a listen. Okay, so if you think you know the answer to this month's Audio Rewind puzzler, send your answer to podcast@retrodisneyworld.com. All entries should be received by October 17th, 2016, and we will pick one random person from all correct answers to win this month's prize, which is the vacation guides and brochures from David Bell. And all entries, whether or not they're correct or not, will be entered into the grand prize pot drawing this in December 2016. So again, get your entries into podcast@retrodisneyworld.com.
Welcome to the General Electric Carousel of Progress. Now, most carousels just go round and round without getting anywhere. But on this one, at every turn, we'll be making progress. And progress is not just moving ahead. It's dreaming and working and building a better way of life.
All right, well, it's time for our main topic. And this month, as we said earlier, we're going to be taking you back to the Carousel of Progress. In order to do that at Walt Disney World, we need to rewind the clocks way back to just after the opening of Disneyland. And when Disneyland opened, there was always a plan to expand Main Street USA. And they were going to expand that out into two different areas, one called International Street and another called Edison Square. Obviously, International Street sounds pretty much what we know of World Showcase and all the Epcot and Progress City items that were thought of. But we're going to focus here on Edison Square and how that turned into Carousel of Progress. Now, in this area, there was going to be a show hosted by what they called an electromechanical man named Wilbur K. Watt. And I sensed Hal was already working on a T-shirt for Wilbur Watt.
Such a catchy name.
That's right. It is. The show would chronicle essentially how electricity has changed in the home from early 19th century to the present and beyond. And GE was kind of the target sponsor for the show. And, you know, if I didn't say this wasn't Carousel of Progress, you'd be saying, oh, it sounds like Carousel of Progress. And this is really where it got its roots. So the thought process back then was they'd have this lobby, and at an appropriate time, the doors would open, and about 125 people would be funneled into the first theater, and they would stand on a multi-tiered platform, each tier separated by a continuous railing, kind of like what Stitch's Great Escape and Mission to Mars was, where you're tiered as you're going in. And when that scene completed, the lights would dim or come up rather, and the automatic doors would open, and you move out to the next area to see the next scene while another group came in to see the first show. This never became a reality for different things due to Disneyland and other things going on with GE, but with a specific pun intended here, the stage was set for the carousel. GE kind of got themselves into trouble in 1959, and they were caught price fixing electrical equipment. So the United States Justice Department slapped them with quite a bit of fines. They had to pay over $50 million in damages and fines. 3 managers received jail sentences, and a number of others were forced to leave the company. So we're now in 1959, 5 years after Disneyland opening. You got the World's Fair coming up. GE has an image problem, and they saw the chance for the World's Fair as a chance to fix it. So what better way to clean it up than partner with Walt Disney, whose name really, stood for quality and getting things done, the right way. So Disney and GE got together, and the Imagineers started to perfect audio animatronics technology that would operate the quote-unquote performers, right? They weren't the most advanced, but got the job done. So, and I think this is chronicled in one of my favorite television shows that were produced under the Disneyland nomenclature back in the 60s was Disneyland Goes to the World's Fair.
The tremendous task of putting these exhibits together was not done by the studio alone. Other companies have done design and manufacturing work, and have licensed the use of rights and inventions that they have developed. This has made it possible to create these exhibits for the benefit of all of us at the World's Fair.
Yeah, that is a great one.
Isn't it? I mean, you see the guy sitting there in that almost like that whole hand brace, and as he's moving, the father's moving. It's
Wathel Rogers sort of invents the first motion capture suit, except it's all, highly mechanical instead of ping pong balls and cameras.
Now, this contraption here might look like something from outer space, but it's actually a control harness for programming the actions and gestures of our audio animatronic figures.
I mean, in that, Walt really shows exactly how they program the audio animatronics, how that whole show was put together. So take a look at it. Disneyland Goes to the World's Fair from 1964. You can find it's on YouTube. It's fantastic thing. So they replaced the Wilbur Watt character with a father and a family, and an actor by the name of Rex Allen. He was a cowboy at the time, in different films and such. He did the voice of the father. They recorded him, and then they went out to the Sherman Brothers. We know them from all their great songs that they wrote, and they needed a song that would serve as a bridge between the acts, and that's where we got The Great Big Beautiful Tomorrow. As we know, the retro Disney World singers, cue them right now. They did a beautiful rendition of that song for us.
There's a great big, beautiful tomorrow, shining at the end of every day.
There's a great, big, beautiful tomorrow,
and tomorrow's just a dream away.
Man has a dream, and that's the start. He follows his dream with mind and heart. And when it becomes a reality, it's a dream come true for you and me. So there's a great, big, beautiful tomorrow, shining at the end of every day. There's a great, big, beautiful tomorrow.
Just a dream away.
So the show is now complete. It opens at the New York World's Fair as Progress Land. That was the whole pavilion name. Carousel of Progress was just one part of it. Turns out to be one of the most visited pavilions at the fair. People would wait over an hour, 2 hours in line for the fair, and the lines got so long they actually had to create an additional covered queue for it. What was really interesting is the design was really brilliant for the crowds that were there. Because they upped the ante and they upped the capacity to 200 per theater, the hourly capacity of this ride is almost 3,600 guests. And I started doing some research on this, guys. What do you think like the Mine Train or Haunted Mansion or Splash Mountain is? What do you think they are in comparison?
I'm gonna guess Mansion's about 2,400. I think
they're pretty close. Yeah, between 24 and 28 is what they say.
And I mean, my God, Mine Train.
Yeah, Mine Train is not
800, 900, maybe
12 to 14.
12, okay.
Yeah, Splash is about 18, and Spaceship Earth comes in around 2,100. So think about it. This was designed really, really well to move guests through. But what else made this show unique? And in getting all those people in and out was the rotating theater that increased the capacity, as we talked about, and also didn't have to let the people sit there and get up and the delay and all that time-consuming disruption. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about the way the building was set up at the World's Fair, because that's kind of leads into how the Disneyland building was set up. You would enter on the first floor and then take, JT, you're going to love this, you'd take a speed ramp up to the second floor.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the Disneyland. Now, or was that...
No, this is the World's Fair.
Was it legit a Goodyear speed ramp? So Goodyear was at the World's Fair doing
Well,
it.
I don't know if Goodyear had a name, but it certainly was rubber. I mean, probably made of rubber. So, but
it's made of
the
rubber.
Carousel of Progress, the Carousel of Progress was actually located on the second floor. So
now, why was that? Just for coolness? Like, was it?
Well,
you know what I mean? Like,
we're gonna find out later, because
sorry.
The third part of the show actually was on the first floor. So you would go in, and the rotating theater that we know it was designed by Roger Broggie and Bob Gurr, and the 6 different circle theaters. Obviously, as we know, they all have the divider walls. They revolve clockwise, and the timing was done by every 4 minutes. So the load scene, the load theater, I should say, was something had a very unique display. It was called the Kaleidophonic Screen, and this was screens that stretched from one wall to the other, and then they had the GE logo smack dab in the middle, and they lit up all sorts of patterns and colors, and it was the orchestral version of There's a Great Big Beautiful Tomorrow played in the background. So, and then the theater rotated, and you go through the 4 acts that we're going to talk about. And at the end of the show, the last theater, we all know that we just get up and walk out now, right? But there was no stage. There was just a speed ramp, another speed ramp in the middle of the theater that would take you up through the center of the building to Walt Disney's Sky Dome Spectacular.
Whoa.
Which, yeah, I'm gonna buzz through that. And this is, even though it's not Walt Disney World, it really lends to when you see the photos of it, you really see how the Progress Land pavilion was early inklings of what Epcot became. So you go up into the Sky Dome, and it's a giant daytime type planetarium sprayed with asbestos, so it's very high air quality in there, and they would project different images of nature and energy on the dome and the way that GSG was harnessing electricity to help its customers. Now, JT, to answer your earlier question, at the end, we now walk back down to the first floor where a demonstration of a controlled thermonuclear fusion was witnessed.
No way.
Yeah. So they would use this magnetic field to squeeze a plasma of deuterium gas and just for a couple millionths of a second, and then it would essentially explode at 20 million degrees Fahrenheit, make this loud bang, a flash, and this is the atomic era, and it's creating free energy, and is a fantastic description of this, and we'll have to post the link to it. There's photos of this, the pavilion, and they said that people that work there would hear this awful bang every 4 to 6 minutes as this miniature fusion explosion went off. So, I mean, we could sit here and talk about this for hours. It was a fantastic pavilion. So that's the really first part of Carousel of Progress. But the World's Fair ends. So what are they going to do with the show? So they decided to relocate it to Disneyland, and GE agrees to sponsor it, and so they bring it there. And don't forget, this time Disneyland's got its new Tomorrowland. So in 1967, it comes out. It's a two-story build.
What, 2-3 years later?
Yeah, the World's Fair was the 64, 65 World's Fair, so about 2 years later.
So where did it go in between? Do we know?
Just they had constructed it and moved it, transported it, got it all put back together. They had to build a whole new building because the building itself was...
So it's probably a lot of construction, and they just moved the internal parts over or something? Or
Exactly.
Okay.
And my understanding from my reading and my research is that they constructed a whole new carousel and then brought the stages and everything in. The show itself, it was a 2-story building this time. The show itself really didn't change too much. There are a few minor changes to different audio animatronic positions and voices and props and stuff. But JT, they once again at the end, they had a speed ramp.
Speed ramp alert.
Yeah, that would take you up to the upper level, and you would have a additional 4-minute post-show narrated by the mother and father, and they would show the entire model of Progress City at the top, at the second floor of the Carousel of Progress. GE eventually thinks that too many locals are seeing the show and they don't feel that their advertising dollar is doing well. So in 1973, they pack it up along with the Progress City model and ship it on down to Walt Disney World. The theater there didn't go to waste, actually. They ran a version of America Sings with audio animatronics and rotating theater for about 14 years thereafter. So it certainly, the building didn't go to waste. But so now we are where we always talk about, right? Disney World. So we build a new, or I shouldn't say we, but a new theater is built in Walt Disney World, and this time 1 story. So we've gone from 3 stories to 2 stories to 1 story. And then there's a balcony on the edge where the people mover can go around. If any of you remember the very early versions of Carousel of Progress, the outside of the building was white, but it had these blue stripes and that kind of get smaller and smaller as the building turned, and then they come around and get bigger again. How you remember those, right? They were cool.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
They were really neat. And one interesting, strange fact was that in Walt Disney, and maybe you know the reason, when they built the theater in Walt Disney World, it rotated counterclockwise, but the other 2 rotated clockwise. So I don't know if anybody knows the reason of why or how or what.
Yeah,
we're all looking
sure.
at each other going, I don't know.
East Coast versus West Coast. They had to switch it for the gravity.
I was going to say maybe if it was, Northern Hemisphere and Southern Hemisphere and rotations are different.
Yeah, I don't know.
So the kaleidophonic screens were now gone, and they had a lot of problems with them. So we just had these kind of plain silver curtains with the GE logo in the center, in the load and unload, the kind of different color lights that changed on and off. And GE liked it. They signed a 10-year contract. It opened in January 1975. A couple things changed. They asked the Sherman Brothers to write a new song because they felt they didn't want their customers to wait for a Great Big Beautiful Tomorrow. They wanted them to buy something today. So The Best Time of Your Life, or sometimes called Now Is the Time, that song was created. And of course, this opens up a debate of which is the better song.
Is there a debate? I mean, there's one that was personally picked by Walt and one that was personally picked by the president of GE. I mean,
exactly.
I'll go with Walt Disney.
It's very catchy.
Yeah, it's got the Sherman Brothers catchiness.
I mean,
to me though, when I think Carousel of Progress, it does not fit that song. It just doesn't. And I mean, when's the first time I saw it? Like the early 90s when I can remember seeing it. So
yes, I saw it in the 80s, and I remember the best time of your life, quite a bit. What about you, Hal?
I was going to say, growing up in the 1970s, and that's the only version of that I ever knew. So when they ended up switching it to the Great Big Beautiful Tomorrow, it was like, what is this? I mean, I was kind of aware of it, but like it just it seems wrong to me because I grew up with the other one.
Did it ruin it for you? Like you're like, what are you back? Like, did you flip flop? Now it's like, which one seems more real
We'll
to you?
talk about that as we get into the later version. I had sort of a love-hate. I liked it when it first came out, and then I didn't like it so much, and I think I'm going back to a neutral position.
You threw a pie at the guy's face in his eye the first time.
So when it opened, they did have a new cast of voices and for the performers in the 1975 version, including actor Duggan, another cowboy, as the father. And they did some additional cosmetic and set design changes. The finale was changed to a New Year's Eve in the home of the 1970s, and the breed of the dog changed. And then later on in 1981, the finale was updated to be New Year's Eve in the home of the 1980s. And they had a new script written, but the majority of the show remained the same. Later on in 1985, General Electric's contract expired. 10 years was up, and they chose not to renew. Plus, they also had the sponsorship of Horizons at the time over in Epcot. So Disney went through and attempted to remove as many of the General Electric references as they could. And at this time, the sign outside was replaced with a kind of a circular blueprint wedge design of the 6 theaters, which I think is what I remember in my head as the logo of Carousel Progress. I think it's another idea for a shirt right there, I'll tell you.
Funny you should mention that.
Oh, funny. Well, we'll get to that towards the end.
I'd like a speed ramp shirt. That's what I would like.
I knew JG you got a speed ramp.
Yeah, okay. Sorry.
And this logo was also changed in the opening, in the load and the unload. And there are still a few GE logos that exist on a couple of the household appliances through the attraction. But so that brings us up to the 1985, and that concludes our load section of the Carousel of Progress. So let's let the century begin.
The challenge always lies ahead, and as long as man dreams and works and builds together, these years too can be the best time of your life.
Now is the time, now is the best time, now is the best time of your life. Life is a prize.
So, Act 1 begins in the house before there is electricity, and as Dad comes on, he is showing off his kitchen, and he's talking about all the great things in his kitchen, like the latest in cast iron stoves and all the whatnot. And this is consistent from the Disneyland version forward. And in fact, the second scene, which is the mother and daughter doing laundry.
But with my new wash day Marvel, it takes only 5 hours to do the wash. Imagine.
That's right, folks. Now Mother has time for recreations
like canning and polishing the stove.
Okay, Mother.
Has also managed to stay consistent through all the years. So the mom is ironing, and the daughter is using the Wash Day Marvel in order to do the laundry. And it actually wasn't until this very latest version with Gene Shepard that they actually bothered to explain why 5 hours to do the laundry was astounding. and my assumption was, if you had watched the show in 1964 and you were an adult person, you had grown up probably through the 1920s or the 1930s, and you were aware of how long it took to do laundry. So 5 hours was a big deal. And as the father now explains, that process used to take 2 days. And actually, that's what the Carousel of Progress is really all about. As a sales vehicle for General Electric, it is supposed to be a testament of how electricity and General Electric products have freed up people from the drudgery of daily life, so that way they can do other things. And that what those other things are sort of shift over the course of the years as the attraction progresses. But it is this whole idea of progress actually being an empower people to do something other than just have to take care of the basic necessities. So we go from the mother and daughter doing the laundry, and then in the 64 World's Fair and Disneyland version, where today we have the boy looking at the stereoscope of Little Egypt doing the hoochie coochie. So in the Disneyland version, it was actually a boy with a vacuum cleaner, this early sort of like air suction vacuum. So that managed to stay through 64 Disneyland. And then for some reason, when they switched it to Walt Disney World, they took out that and they put in the boy with the stereoscope. And my assumption is they just felt that gag just wasn't landing with people. Maybe it just wasn't funny enough, because they mentioned vacuums in other places in the throughout the rest of the show. So I think they just tried to inject some humor in there. In the 70s version and 80s version, the dad just says,
"With his amazing new stereoscope, my son can now see and learn all about the latest events in the world, like the World's Fair in St. Louis."
Wowee! Look at that! What's the hoochie coochie, Dad?
Get back to your homework, son.
The audience is supposed to know what the hoochie coochie is and how it's a little risque. But by the time you got to the late 90s, nobody knew what that was. So then they had to explain further that it was Little Egypt and it was dance, and they had to sort of explain the fact that it was sort of naughty. So
you put that away before your mother sees it.
Exactly. That's how we got the progression there.
It's in 3D nonetheless.
Yeah, actually, it was the first Viewmaster,
stereoscope, right? Yeah, exactly.
Then we go to Grandma listening to the talking machine with the parrot, which was originally a Tiki Room parrot, saying about how she keeps that thing playing all day long. So that gag has managed to continue all the way through. Then we go to the older daughter getting ready for the trolley party.
Thanks for letting me go, Papa.
Be home by 9 o'clock, daughter.
Yes, Papa.
And at sometimes they explain that she's been prepping for 3 hours. At other times they just mention that it's replacing the horseless carriage. Sometimes they don't. But the idea is that electricity is an active thing outside of the house, but not yet inside the house. Because then Dad will make a comment at the end about how...
But there's a new company working on bringing the same power that runs the trolley into folks' homes.
So then after that... and there's a very interesting thing there, too, especially in the... I think it's it is the World's Fair version. So the entire time while this is going on... the actors are, the dad's breaking the fourth wall between the audience and himself. And in the early version, Patricia actually turns around and looks at the audience and says, "Father, I'm indecent." And the dad said, No, they're friends. Don't worry about it. It's fine. Because technically she's in her undergarments in that scene, even though
But we're friends.
Yeah. Don't worry. It's only somewhat creepy.
Yeah, and that's only in the last version. In the earlier mid 80s edition, there's no reference to the fact that she's in her undergarments.
Yeah, she makes a big deal out at first, and then it's just kind of not.
In the current version,
right?
It's a weird difference between the two. Well, the whole thing. It's just that the whole focus of the show shifted. I mean, since we're getting onto it now with the end of scene 1. The whole focus of the show shifted by the time when they redid the 93 one from appliances making your life better to more charting technological advances over the last 100 years in general.
Yes.
So there were a lot more references to you can get across the country by train in 3 days. You can do this in X number of time, and we have the ability to do X, Y, and Z now. There's Schwartz and his Hupmobile. all of that was in the 93 version. It's not in the earlier versions because the earlier versions are mostly designed to sell appliances.
Exactly. Yeah, they did a lot of work to try to give context to a lot of the stuff because people, everyone who knew what was going on previously is now dead. So now they go through great lengths to explain things to the audience, which I think makes sense.
Well, it's one of the reasons why the script 23 years later, with a few exceptions that we'll make fun of later, it still works for the most part. Yep. Because, you're still taking a snapshot of talking about how things were, 40, 60, 80, 100 years ago.
Right. And they were doing that then. Now they have a little bit more exposition in order to catch the audience up. One of the amazing things actually about the show is that many of the props and probably a good number of the animatronics actually date back to 1964. They are
absolutely.
Yeah.
As you watch version after version and you're looking at it saying, wow, all that stuff's still there. I mean, that's the same stove. That's the same this. That's the same that.
Those pictures on the wall. In some places,
in fact,
the wallpaper. In some places, not.
When I was researching some of the differences between, Disneyland and the World's Fair, it's like, oh, yeah, they moved a book from the desk to off the shelf. And it's like the only change, in the entire scene.
I mean, it's really remarkable. And especially when you consider the fact that, they built it in a warehouse in California, broke it down, shipped it across the country to New York, rebuilt it, broke it down, shipped it back across the country to California, rebuilt it, broke it down, shipped it across the country to Florida, and rebuilt it again.
Yep. Yeah, Tom Nabby, you'll remember, was our guest last year, a Disney legend. He was one of the leaders of Tomorrowland at the time that both Space Mountain and the Carousel were installed in 1975. And he spends almost no time in his book talking about it, but he makes that point that they had deconstructed and installed it so many times at that point that it was just routine, that it required almost no anecdotal effort to build it at Walt Disney World.
It's almost like a carnival ride at that point,
Yeah.
And actually, if you've ever seen photos of behind the sets, there are letter and number designations on all the pieces. So it's very easy to figure out what's supposed to go where, because you put A1 next to A2 and you screw them together, and it's so as we wrap up in scene 1, Dad tells us about what those crazy GE scientists are working on, and one thing's for sure.
Now is the time, now is the best time, now is the best time of your life. Life is a prize, live every minute. Open your eyes and watch how you win it. Yesterday's memories may sparkle and gleam. Tomorrow is still but a dream. Right here and now, you've got it made. The world's forward marching and you're in the parade. Now is the time, now is the best time. Be it a time of joy or strife, there's so much to cheer for. Be glad you're here, for it's the best time of your life.
So now we're in Act 2. We are in the age of electricity. Everyone is using it. Farmers, factories, whole towns, as they say. And even as we talk about things that they've reused from the World's Fair, even the sounds of the trolleys and things that they use in the 70s and 80s version are exactly the same soundtrack as the World's Fair, just used again. We see Dad once again lovingly showing off all the great GE products with what he calls Mother's electrical servants. So there's things like vacuum cleaners and toasters and waffle irons, and they have a little musical thing that they do when he turns them on all, and they all go crazy.
And they all go to work at the click of a switch. Take it easy, you'll blow a fuse.
And in the actual new version, they do blow a fuse. They pull a page right out of the Gene Shepard playbook.
That's right. Does anybody else bothered by the fact of all the wires all over the place, that it just seemed out of place? I mean, I know there were kind of putting an accent on the fact that everything was electricity. But you've got a chandelier coming down and like a 3-way socket screwed into that.
Well,
and
that was limited though. It's like there's only one plug there. That's
right.
where it's.
Well, but the reason for that is those houses, unless they were built at that time, they were not built to be wired for electricity. So that was not uncommon, although they started to put those like soffits and things along them. So you'll see them in older hotels where they have the line that runs along it that kind of covers the electrical wiring. So I think they're trying to give you that. I mean, it does look odd, but they're obviously making the point.
Yeah, for my OCD, it's just like, oh man, you got to tuck those things. Yeah. You got to put them behind. I also didn't like the neon colors that they chose. I felt that was at. I know they were trying to highlight them, but
they had the black light effect when they.
I never liked that.
So now here's something where we made a change from Disneyland to Walt Disney World to now. So in the Disneyland version, now that there's electricity, Mom is able to fill out her day by continuing to iron in the evening with an electric light and an electric iron. So when Dad makes a reference to...
You just iron the wrinkles out of my shirts.
Yes, dear.
She now, thanks to electricity, can continue to iron the wrinkles onto her shirts even when it's nighttime. As we get to the Walt Disney World version, that has changed, and she is now enjoying her embroidery in the cool of the evening. So she has an electric light. The inside, because it's July, it's summertime. As we move to Act 2, that's another difference. In the 64 World's Fair up to the Walt Disney World versions, these things weren't aligned to holidays. They were just aligned to seasons of the year. So the first act takes place in spring. As they prudently said, the robins are back, and that's a sure sign of spring. In Act 2, it's the hottest summer they've had in years. As we get to the 94 version, we are now aligned with the 4th of July, so Mother is sewing 4th of July costumes out on the porch. So then we shift over to sort of like a little den or a little listening area. And from the 64 World's Fair version to the 94 version, there's a boy listening to jazz on a Victrola.
Oh, by the way, we've got a phonograph now, and there's a new kind of music called jazz that all the youngsters go for.
Very enthusiastically.
Yes,
in the 1970 first Disney World version, he is like, it's like he's having a spasm. And then when they redid it in 81, he settles down a little bit.
Just kind of taps his toes.
Kind of like a little bit of a toe tap. But I mean, the 75 to 81, I mean, it's funny. It looks like the animatronics like going to shake the record player off the.
And then at that same time, Grandpa is listening to his crystal radio set.
With his crystal set, Grandpa can get big-time entertainment from distances up to 100 miles away.
The interrupted program brings news bulletin. Charles A. Lindbergh landed in Paris today. I repeat, Charles A. Lindbergh landed in Paris.
In the Disneyland in 64 version, he's actually listening to an entertainment program, which you can kind of hear coming out. By time we get to the Walt Disney World version, we actually hear about a radio news breaks in saying that Charles A. Lindbergh has landed in Paris. So that puts an exact date on this version of May 21st, 1927. And
it's interesting because that was in the initial Disney World version from 75 to 81. And then from 81 to 93, that remained, even though the scene changed a little bit. That break in the music with the news report of Lindbergh landing also made it into that version. And then when they redid it in 93, the scene opens with Father making one reference and then saying, "It's a fellow named Charles Lindbergh says he's going to fly all the way across the Atlantic." He'll never do it. It'll never happen. So anybody who saw the previous versions and remembered that, it's a little bit of a reference to it in the Father is Dumb version, which I'll talk about a little later. But that's the 93 on. Everything is about making the dad look dumb.
And there are a number of instances where they've sort of taken, even in that version, since the boy is picking out music for like the fireworks show or something ridiculous like that. It's like the dad has to mention the jazz age in his opening dialogue instead of actually letting the boy like be listening to jazz. So some of those things that just sort of happen naturally in the other versions, they actually compressed into dialogue that the dad has. So then in that version that we're talking about now, Grandpa no longer has the crystal radio. He's listening to a Crosley radio. And before where he sort of had he had one hand down holding he had one hand up to his ear holding a headphone and another one sort of down with the cord. It's like now he's holding like a large bottle rocket or something like that, which is fairly dressed as Benedict Arnold or something. I don't know. Now we go to something that actually changed somewhat radically between Disneyland and the 64 World's Fair and Walt Disney World. In Disneyland and the 64 World's Fair, there's a gag where the older daughter is with her boyfriend, sort of in a room. They're in an embrace, and then the mom yells at him and tells him that it's 9:30. And then the dad makes a joke about how before radio called out what time it was, that the mom had been doing that for years. So that joke apparently was not funny enough, and instead they switched it to the daughter looking very flappery in her room, getting ready. And actually there's a very interesting discussion that starts here that sort of shows you where they are going with the 1970s and 80s version. Because suddenly the daughter is actually having a very serious discussion about her wanting to go out and get a job. And the father says that it's a man's world, and then the daughter shoots back that
that won't last forever. It won't always be. Yeah.
And this is the beginning of a thread that we will see work its way through the acts through this version of the show, as we start to see a little thing about empowering women throughout this. And potentially this is because of what electricity does as far as freeing up people from the chores. But it's an interesting change and something that was quite deliberate. As we move on to the 93 version, the daughter is in a Statue of Liberty costume, and she is basically complaining that she looks ridiculous and that her boyfriend will reject her. And the dad just makes a funny joke about it. That she's going to carry a torch for him or something like that. And then we shift to what was probably Walt's personal favorite scene, which is Cousin Orville, who later is known as Uncle Orville, in the bathroom.
Well, we've got indoor plumbing now. Saves a lot of walking. In our new bathroom, we've got a house guest.
And there's a really great story here. I can't remember if it's Mark Davis that tells it, about how they had the staging set up with the bathtub pointed towards the back of the theater, and Walt jumped up on stage and said, no, it's got to be like this, and he actually got into the bathtub and got into the position of where Uncle or Cousin Orville would be, and like talked about wiggling the toes. And he's like, no, it's got to be staged like this. So Walt was very hands-on with this scene.
Cousin Orville. And as usual, he's taken over the coolest spot in the house. I will say one thing for him, though. Orville's rigged up something pretty clever. He calls it air cooling. Too bad he's not reading the Help Wanted ads.
So Cousin Orville is in a bathtub. He's reading a copy of the Police Gazette, which apparently was sort of like a combination of like news and girly magazine at the time. And if you remember your Diamond Horse Show review and the Golden Horse review in Disneyland, there was actually a musical number devoted to the girls of the Police Gazette. So that was a real historical magazine. And he's rigged up the air cooling, so he's got the block of ice with the GE fan in front of it that's blowing on him because it's very hot in the rest of the house. And I guess this is going to set us up for the idea that GE produces air conditioning later on in life.
That's one of the couple scenes that always gets a chuckle from everybody.
It's funny. And one of the really interesting things about him, if you ever see a photo or get to see the figure close up in real life, he's got a head and arms and about half of his torso, and then he has no groin area. It's just a giant speaker, and then he has enough of the legs and the toes that you see, but his entire midsection is non-existent because it doesn't have to be there.
How it's probably worth mentioning, because we'll have a bunch of angry Twitterers saying, you didn't mention this, that the cousin Uncle Orville voice was done by Mel Blanc, who was the infamous voice of Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck, right? And
that's right.
A billion other Looney Tunes characters and other cartoon characters.
So he's also the voice of the parrot that complains about the mom or the grandma listening to the tenor all day. And I think he was also the voice of the entertainer that cuts in and out very briefly in the 1964 version. So I think they had him do a couple of things. And they loved it so much, and it became so famous that when they did the 1993 refurbishment, they use it twice in the show. That show is the only audio work he ever did for Walt Disney.
No privacy at all around this place.
Sorry, Orville.
And with that big laugh, Act 2 ends, and we are ready to go into the Frantic 40s.
Well, we can be sure of one thing.
Now is the time, now is the best time, now is the best time of your life. Life is a prize, live every minute. Open your eyes and watch how you win it. Yesterday's memories may sparkle and gleam. Tomorrow is still but a dream. Right here and now, you've got it made. The world's forward marching and you're in the parade. Now is the time, now is the best time. Be it a time of joy or strife. There's so much to cheer for. Be glad you're here, for it's the best time of your life.
Now we're in the Frantic 40s, and God, the music is better than ever. Earlier in the early versions, the Walt Disney World and the 64 and Disneyland versions, it's autumn. The kids are back at school. They're excited about that because I guess they're just not bumming around the house anymore. In the 1993 version, to what we have now, it's Halloween time. So there's a really spooky, weird-looking pumpkin that goes back and forth between the table and the refrigerator. Good luck finding that, if you know what I'm talking about. He has a very weird surprise face. And Dad starts off talking about the dishwasher and a couple of their appliances again, as he is prone to do.
But my favorite is the electric dishwasher. Now Mother spends less time in the kitchen and I don't have to dry the dishes anymore.
He seems to really like that dishwasher. Apparently he has a thing against drying dishes, so that was a big deal. In the 64 and Disneyland version, at this point we segue to Grandma in the den, and there's a little joke about her hearing aid. So apparently Grandma has a hearing aid. She's listening to some music on the radio.
And Grandma has a new hearing aid. Nothing, Grandma.
Oh, I thought you said I had a new hearing aid.
This changed when we moved to Walt Disney World. And this changed the scene where Grandma and Grandpa... Grandpa was in that scene, but he was sleeping. So Grandpa is still sleeping. Grandma is now up next to the TV. And she makes sure that Grandpa's asleep. And you see like a dance program on. And then she clicks the clicker off and starts watching wrestling.
Are you asleep, dear? Come on! Come on! Belt him, Tiger! Let him have it! That's it, Tiger! Come on! Let him have
Well, to each his own.
And
another one of those
and one of the changes in the progressive, the 3 versions at Disney World, is she gets less loud in each of the 3 versions. Because in that 75 version, she's screaming at top volume. Like, there's no way Grandpa's not waking up.
Yeah.
Then in the 81 redo, she's a little more, reasonable. And the 93 version, she basically, the current version, she basically is at the same volume level as when she's talking. Yeah. Give him a left, you big lug.
There was a great little thing in there too, where in the I don't know if they still use the music. I'm trying to remember in the 93, but in the 70s and 80s version, they used the song Two Silhouettes from Make Mine Music for the dance sequence. So there's a little piece of Disney music in there. And then we move on to so there's a little bit of a change in timing. So in 64 in Disneyland, it was then Mom in the Rumpus Room. And there was definitely a change in and Brian, I'll let you talk about the 93, but there's a change in sort of the way the gags run in that one. In the early versions, the Disneyland in the 64, Mom has come up with the idea of the paint mixer, or the food mixer for mixing paint. The scene is very quick.
Mother's pretty ingenious, like using her food mixer for stirring paint. Well, that's my wife, Sarah. You know, I remember when...
Darn.
Is there a doctor in the house?
Never mind. I'm all right, dear.
Well, okay.
When we get to Walt Disney World, this gag is completely gone, and she still comes up with the idea of using the food mixer for the paint. But she ends up having this conversation with him about equal pay for women for equal work.
John?
Yes, dear.
I was just thinking.
About what?
That if you hired a man to do this, wouldn't you pay him?
Well, of course, dear.
Then I should get equal pay.
Well, well, we might negotiate something later on, dear.
When?
In the 93 version, there's a complete change of where the gag falls. They did in some ways revert back to the older one, but Brian, let's talk about that.
Well, it's the most glaring example in the current version of the shift in some of the narrative of the show. So obviously the first version's the World's Fair version, and the Disneyland version, very traditional, father knows best kind of theme throughout the whole thing. He's the narrator, he's the authority in the house, is very, in keeping with the times. And then the 75 and 81 versions, which, ran for whatever it is, 13 years, probably longer than that. It ran for 17 years. There's references to a little bit more about equality, a little bit more about, as you mentioned, if you had a man doing this job, you'd have to pay him. And I'm here doing this, for gratis. And the daughter talking about getting a job in the prior scene. So what I call this is the Homer Simpson effect. Because it kind of took shape in the 90s. Dad is dumb, and dad is someone to be made fun of. And so that starts to become very pronounced in the third and fourth acts that currently run. I have to change the fuses because dad's an idiot and blows the fuse box out. Dad rigged up the mixing machine instead of the mom who had rigged it up for 30 years. Dad rigged it up and it splattered paint all over the room. In the fourth scene, which we'll get to, dumb dad can't do voice activation and burns the turkey. That is one of the shifts in the script. And I don't really know that's I don't care for it myself. I think it's cheap humor.
And that's probably, in fairness, I don't know if a woman would ruin like her mixer in order to...
I don't know that anyone...
Yeah, no one would do that.
Mixer.
It is purely a gag.
I don't think it's gender specific.
Yeah. Although oddly
they're
enough...
too expensive.
Yeah. About 2 years ago, I was having some home renovation done, and we brought in a contractor. And oddly enough, I did find a hand mixer in the garage that someone had used to stir paint. So someone legitimately has used it for that.
So it is being done.
It's a handy tool for $10 to do it. I mean, it's.
Yeah, at that time, I don't know what one of those mixers.
But that's not a mixer. That's a stand mixer. That's a KitchenAid there. I mean, those things are $300-$400 if you've ever bought one.
So then we move from there onto to the older daughter. Using one of those belt vibrator machines.
Well, today, our daughter Jane keeps in shape with electricity.
Babs, I'm having so much fun in my first year at college.
Jane, have you met any seniors yet?
Oh, dozens.
And that gag has largely stayed the same. The dialogue changes a little bit from time to time. As to the punctuation of like how the dad can react against it. So in the oldest versions, she doesn't want to be jiggled around in like her boyfriend's jalopy.
Besides, I wouldn't be seen in his old jalopy. Makes me bounce and shake like a bowl of jelly. Oh, and listen.
I'm having another phone put in next week.
And then, haha, isn't that funny because she's getting jiggled around now. In the 70s and 80s, he does the hip action.
But I'm having some trouble with the rumba. I can't quite get the hip action. Oh, and listen, Babs.
Any more hip action and she'll disconnect something.
Yeah, and that stayed for both versions.
Yeah.
It's worth noting that the 75 and 81 versions, which ran until 93, there were changes in the dialogue in some spots, but very subtle in the first three acts. I mean, most of what they said stayed, with a line changed here or there, or a reference changed here or there.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to mention about, as we're getting deeper into the show, the current version that's been running since 93, all of the one-liners, the little references that people have, they really didn't take hold prior to that. Now, it might just be a generational thing that we've all seen the shows because the current one running has run longer than any other. But the references in the acts, things like my lumbago's acting up, and there goes Schwartz in his Hupmobile, and Papa, I'm indecent. I mean, all that is exclusive to this most recent version. So there aren't really a whole lot of lines that float around from the prior versions.
Yeah, that was. I mean, I have a couple of those things that stuck with me, but it is a whole different script now. So one of the long-standing questions about the Carousel of Progress is whatever happened to the daughter in scene 1 who was working on the thing. Like, she mysteriously the youngest daughter mysteriously vanishes after she's helping out with the Wash Day Marvel.
Yeah, she's in the first scene there as the mother's doing the wash, and she's next to a spinning wheel, right? Like a.
She's actually operating the Wash Day Marvel.
That's it.
Pulling the handle that makes it turn.
Cranking it. Yeah.
So she exists again in the 64 and Disneyland version. She's actually, they then shift over. The dad is talking about television coming into the home, and the young daughter is there with the young son that we see in all the scenes, and they're watching like a Cowboys and Indians show on the TV.
We've got the new electronic babysitter. Television is here, and no doubt it will improve. But I'll bet there'll always be the good guys shooting it out with the bad guys.
She has moved to the undersea base to work with her husband in Horizons.
That whole gag actually shows up in the fourth act too, because in the future version, in the fourth act, where you're in modern times, it's like they make a joke about television, and it's still cowboys and Indians shooting it out. So with the whole cowboy and Indian thing no longer being a big deal on TV, I think they needed to rework that gag, and that's when they ended up coming with the idea of having grandma watching the wrestling. So it shifts in the 1975 version and the 80s version of the son building a model airplane.
Right now, my son is more interested in models. Airplane models, that is.
Dad! It works! It works!
I hear. And so do all the neighbors. Good work, son.
Which presumably was a hobby that would have been popular, and GE actually was in some aircraft manufacturing with engines and whatnot, so it was probably a minor tie-in. In the modern version, the son is making a jack-o'-lantern, and he makes a bunch of cracks about how It's ugly like his sister, which I guess is very typical.
Which is hilarious too, because for some reason, even though it's not actually Halloween, he's sitting there in full werewolf makeup with hair stuck to his face and wolf's teeth. And my favorite drawing in the world on the on the wall, it says "My Halloween costume" and a drawing of him as a werewolf.
So that's Act 3. We are then ready to move on to the modern age.
And it's time to sing the song again. Come on, everybody.
Now is the time, now is the best time, now is the best time of your life.
Life is a prize. Live every minute.
Open your eyes and watch how you win it. Yesterday's memories may sparkle and gleam. Tomorrow is still but a dream.
Right here and now, you've got it made.
The world's forward marching and you're in the parade. Now is the time, now is the best time. Be it a time of joy or strife. There's so much to cheer for. Be glad you're here, for it's the best time of your life.
So now we have gone through 3 generations, and we have landed smack dab in the middle of modern society, whatever that means at the current time that the version of the carousel is running. So in the 64 World's Fair version and in the 67 version, we are in this incredibly spacious looking apartment. The rotating sides are gone. It is just this absolutely amazing open floor plan with like a huge couch in the center and kitchen off to one side and a entertainment center off on the other wing, places for dining, presents stacked all over the place. It's grand. In the 64 World's Fair version, they're living in a GE Medallion home, and Mom will talk about that. Amazingly, in the Disneyland version, they are actually living in Progress City, which is what would become, or what was supposed to become, Epcot in Orlando. So you can actually see that central tower from the Cosmopolitan Hotel, like out the window behind them.
And then after you ride, after you see you go upstairs and see Progress.
See it,
right there. It's out the window and it's right above you.
In this 60s, 70s version from Disneyland and the World's Fair, this is where the hard sell of GE appliances comes on.
We were just reminiscing about Christmas in the old days when
getting ready for the holidays meant hectic days of cleaning house and preparing extra food.
And as I started to say,
because the dad stops talking and is constantly interrupted by the mom, who just goes on ad nauseum about how fantastic every appliance she has in and how there were so many colors to choose from.
But today our new
all-electric home gives us lots more time to enjoy ourselves.
In fact, it's a...
Would you believe it? I'm cooking dinner. Or rather, my electric range is.
How you can use mood lighting to go with your music in order to like shift the colors of lights, which I think is hilarious because now with the LEDs, it's like we're actually selling the same thing.
Well, it's funny. If you look at that Disneyland version, a lot of they talk about as futuristic and life-changing is stuff that really wasn't for sale in the 70s and 80s and even the 90s, but is commonplace now, is stuff you see, the automated homes and all that. You're seeing it come to fruition now.
Right. They even talk about videotape recorders in the Disneyland version.
Our television console is more than just a TV set. It has a built-in videotape recorder.
Now we can record our favorite shows for viewing at a more convenient hour.
And that was, I think, far from common in 67, right? I mean, I know it existed, but it wasn't. Yeah, that wasn't normal.
Right. No, there was no consumer-owned video recorders then.
Yeah, so I think these were always set like just a sketch in the future, but still very modern. And man, she loves her dishwasher at this point, like as much as Dad loved the dishwasher in the 1940s.
And I'm thrilled with my new dishwasher.
It's amazing. And the washing machine, they actually have a washing machine like in their kitchen. And she talks about how, I used to dread doing that, but now it's totally cool. So now that Mom's time has been freed up, she is available to do things like be in the garden club and be in a book club. When we get to Disneyland, that's the same thing. So she used her extra time for those types of things. Oh, and there's a funny little thing. So we're very accustomed in the Walt Disney World version that Grandma and Grandpa are there. Basically, the whole family is there. In the World's Fair and in the Disneyland version, it is just the mom and dad alone. Grandma and Grandpa live in a retirement community, and they are flying in to spend the holidays with them, and the daughter and the son are off at the airport picking them up. And I think the key takeaway here was, probably up until this point, it was expected that your grandparents would live with you until they passed away, rather than having their own independent home, which I think is why we always saw them in the previous versions. So that was actually a big change in society. And as Todd mentioned, so you get to see the wonders of what the GE scientists are up to in the 64 version. In the Disneyland version, you go upstairs and you see Product City.
And so next, Mother and I invite you to come along and see some of the electrifying new ideas from General Electric for our city and for your own hometown.
Which is really cool, and they talk about the friendly GE nuclear power plant that's right there in the city. And the amusement park, which you actually see today from the Wedway, the mom talks about, it's either the mom says, like, it's not Disneyland, but it's clean, it's a lot of fun.
It's cheaper.
It's cheaper. But that model that was upstairs, was chopped down and brought here. But that was really what they were envisioning for Epcot. And I have to give Walt a lot of credit for getting GE to pay for him to be able to figure out what Epcot would be. That was absolutely brilliant. So in the Disneyland, in the Walt Disney World version, scene 4 is radically different when it opens up in 1975.
You know, this is the time of day I really love. Will you look at that sunset out there?
Fabulous. Just breathtaking.
Great way to end a great year.
Really?
Mm-hmm. So now suddenly the whole family is there. The son is, for no particular reason, suddenly 10 years older. He's now 18 or 19. The older daughter seems to be about the same age that she was in the past, early 20s. Grandma and Grandpa are there. They look absolutely, completely different from Grandma and Grandpa in the previous scenes. So totally different sculpts. I don't know if I chalk that up to... they're leaner, so maybe they're more active, so therefore they look different. I'm not sure if there's a story behind that or not. Dad, in this version, is cooking chili. That's his big contribution to
there we go.
Eve.
And he's still smart.
Yep. He's still smart. Now, Mom, continuing on this theme of empowering women to be able to do things, Mom is not concerned with the garden club now that she has free time thanks to her electric appliances. She is actually on a clean waters committee, and the daughter mentions that she got a letter from the mayor thanking her for getting a bond issue passed. So she's involved with government. She's a very active, I don't know how to put it, like women,
she's active in civic affairs.
Yes. And I suspect part of this may have been just from the overall women's liberation movement that was going on in the early 1970s.
I think you have to look at the time frame where both the 75 and 81 shows were done, and you're in the middle of your All in the Family and lots of other Maude, these programs on TV that certainly shifted the role of women in media. And the show that they were running when they closed in Disneyland must have looked terribly dated in 1973.
Sure.
Just because of the colossal shift. And so it stayed there throughout the 80s. And I think by the 90s, it became passé to have your entertainment be so political. And so there was less of a message per se in the 93 redo, which again is why 23 years later, other than a few things we'll talk about in a little bit, there really aren't, it's not so dated that you sit there and roll your eyes every 5 minutes at something.
Yeah. And one of the things that I find fascinating about the change between the World's Fair and Disneyland and Walt Disney World, we talk about how the Sherman Brothers had to write this song because, there's this idea that GE wanted them to say, like, now is the time to buy appliances. Don't get it tomorrow, get it today.
Right.
But there's absolutely no hard sell of appliances in this version of the fourth act. In fact, they're barely mentioned. I'm like, he's cooking chili on a cooktop. He's not doing anything with ovens or dishwashers or anything.
It's an induction range, but they don't mention it.
Yeah. When the 81 version comes around, things were updated.
Glad you mentioned that. It's time for me to start my New Year's Eve spectacular.
Dad is now cooking
omelette superbe avec jambon.
Mom has a home computer in front of her.
Well, you two can ponder that age-old question. But since it's almost dark, I think I'll put your recipe on memory and throw a little light on the subject.
She is in charge of the computer. She is using it to store the recipe. She's adjusting the lighting and turning the television channels with the computer. And one of the things that was actually interesting is if you sat in the audience and watched the show, I came in with a zoom lens on my 35mm Canon camera at that time. And the computer screen was actually tracking exactly what they said was going on. So the recipe for omelette superbe avec jambon was actually up on the screen. So I actually have the recipe for omelette superbe avec jambon that we will publish in the show notes.
Look at that.
It is
you can
not
make it
super
for dinner
complex.
for your family. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but now
I'm making it New Year's Eve.
For New Year's Eve, you can make that every year.
Come to my place. We'll have that.
And we should mention that they set were all the ones New Year's Eve up to this point the final scene. I think so.
Yes.
So
yeah.
In the
I think
Disneyland
New Year's
version,
Eve
I would say
started
it was like
the-
sort of between New Year's and Christmas, or maybe it was
Yeah.
the run up till Christmas, and then it went to New Year's, and now we're sort of back to Christmas Day.
Right, but there's always been a Christmas tree and a Christmas
Yes.
setup in the final
Yes.
scene, although they portrayed it as New Year's Eve, as though Christmas had passed and the family was just together. Of course, with your theme of now being the greatest time of your life, it's a new year. You need new washing machines and ovens and
In fact, in the Disneyland and World's Fair version, they even had things like food mixers, like wrapped up with little bows on them, as if they were being given out for the Christmas presents. They're
a
very
TV.
classy.
One of my favorites was the little black and white GE TV that was right there up front with a bow on it.
There's some banter back and forth between the family and all these, between the son and the daughter, and several jokes about being old, and they sort of rehashed the joke about the grandpa being in his 80s, his golf score, which was actually something that the dad just said in the Disneyland version, and now the grandpa gets to say it.
And I think we're living in a wonderful time. Do you really feel that way? The 80s are a wonderful time.
I'm in the 80s myself. My golf score, that is.
And then in the 90s version, like, things change. As the 80s came to a close and the 90s came in, I can attest to the fact that crowds had started to dwindle. And I think they kind of felt like something needed to be done to sort of reinvigorate it. GE had left the sponsorship several years ago. Life was going on, but the Carousel of Progress was not. And so it was time, perhaps, for it to make an exit.
All right, fella, I get the message. And yes, dear, you're right. Now is the time.
Why don't we all sing it?
Now is the time. Now is the best time. Now is the best time of your life. Life is a prize. Live every minute. Open your eyes and watch how you win. Yesterday's memories may sparkle and gleam. Tomorrow is silver and green. Right here and now, you've got it made. The world's forward marching and you're in the parade. Now is the time. Now is the best time. A time of joy or strife. There's so much to cheer for. Be glad you're here for it's the best time of your life.
So with the script and the grandmother commenting to all of them in the final scene that the 80s were a great time to be alive, it probably sounded out of place in 1992 when they finally closed the attraction to refurb it. Had it gone, before I start on the 93 version, how had it gone on seasonal status prior to that when the 80s version was still running?
No.
Okay, so at that time it was still running every day. I remember seeing it in 1988, although I remember the show. I don't remember the specifics of it.
Yeah, the seasonal status didn't start until 2001.
Okay. So in 93 they redo it. They stripping away some of the last of the GE references, although there are still to this day appliances with the GE badge on them. It had been without a sponsor for a while. There's some significant things that happened in the 93 version though. The first is they added Walt's name to the title of the attraction. So it went from Carousel of Progress to becoming Walt Disney's Carousel of Progress. One of the other changes they made in the 93 refurb is that they restored the original Sherman Brothers song, There's a Great Big Beautiful Tomorrow, which for most people listening, that's the version they're most familiar with. They've heard it for the last 23 years. But as you mentioned, it was changed by GE in the 70s. And the interesting thing about it is Richard Sherman and Robert Sherman have both said in interviews that Great Big Beautiful Tomorrow was the song they far preferred, and it was the song that Walt preferred. So I think that was in keeping with the tribute theme that the current show is a tribute and a nod back to the original. They restored the song, and so it is omnipresent in all of our minds after we see it. A lot of the 93 redo was to point out the history of the attraction. And I'm sure part of the reason that was done is at that point it was a 30-year-old attraction from the World's Fair. Other than Small World, was there any other World's Fair attraction? Well, Lincoln's still running in Disneyland at the time, right?
Right. Yeah.
So,
Lincoln's at Disneyland, and the dinosaurs are on the train.
Right, but you're in terms of a standalone attraction where you're really looking to bring people through. They needed to begin to emphasize the historical aspect of the attraction, I think, to make it something worth people sitting through.
Correct.
As interests had shifted at that point from their park goers. So they decided to redo the show, change a lot of the focus, and so they introduced the holidays to each scene, and they went out and needed a new narrator, and they got Gene Shepard.
Welcome to Walt Disney's Carousel of Progress. You're in for a real treat. The Carousel of Progress was Walt's own idea from beginning to end. He loved it.
And Gene Shepard, the most famous thing Gene Shepard has done outside of the Carousel of Progress is he was a humorist amongst other entertaining things that he did. He was an author and a humorist, and he wrote A Christmas Story, the movie that you now see on TBS for 24 hours every Christmas. That is his voice narrating A Christmas Story. He's the adult voice of Ralphie.
Now it was serious. A double dog dare. What else was left but a triple dare you? And finally, the coup de grace of all dares, the sinister triple dog dare.
And he is actually in the Christmas Story movie. So when Ralphie and his brother jump in line to see the Santa Claus, and the old man says to him,
Young man, hey kid, just where do you think you're going?
Going up to see Santa.
The line ends here. It begins there.
that is actually Gene Shepard.
And not to get off a tangent, but a lot of people don't know that Christmas Story is actually a collection of a number of Gene Shepard stories that he put together from his radio show in New York, and you'll actually find some tidbits, including the leg lamp bit and other things in other stories and other movies that he did over the years. So,
Gene Shepard recorded this in 1993. The Christmas theme in the final scene kind of is a little bit funny because obviously he's the star of it, and what we most connect him to is A Christmas Story. But some of the changes in that final scene that we all laugh about now, but in 1993 was when the grandfather talks about the good old days.
You know, in my day.
Oh, no. You're not going to tell us about the old days when you didn't even have a car phone.
Hey, Trish, for a while we didn't even have a house phone.
Every time you're in the theater, everybody laughs. And then he says,
not to mention laser discs and high-def TV. Everything is automated today.
Now, the funny thing about that is Laserdiscs at the time, I mean, they had been on the market since the 80s, but they were the highest quality thing at the time. The other thing that he mentions, high-def TV. High-def TV really didn't become something people were buying for another 10 or 12 years. I mean, the mid-2000s, they became a little bit more, as the coming thing, and then they started dropping $200 a year in price until normal people could afford them. But so they were kind of ahead of their time on that one, and the car phones became. I mean, everybody had mobile phones by the end of the 90s. So it's so funny to hear the line now, because Hal and I were talking before the show. It seems to me it would be very easy to replace that line with a modern reference and just not make the entire scene seem so outdated. But it is kind of endearing every time we go and see it, because we know it's coming. And for those of us who've seen the show 1,000 times, it's funny to hear the laughs in the audience from people don't know the show and are seeing it for the first time.
Wah, wah, wah.
Yes. So the other thing that was done to change the attraction at that time was they added a preamble in that first scene where Gene Shepard comes on and spends about 45 seconds telling you the history of the ride, that Walt was fascinated with Progress and thought it would be neat to do a show that showcased the progress of the American family over the 20th century, and that it premiered at the 64 World's Fair. And then at the end, they just add a little, outro where they tell you to please gather up your belongings and head to the exits. In the previous versions, there was really just an overture in those scenes. So the 93 version has been going strong with really no changes. He's been setting the Christmas turkey on fire for 23 years now.
John, what's wrong with the oven?
In 2001, when the tourism slowdown happened, they did move the attraction to seasonal status. So they would open it during the summers. They would open it during the Christmas holidays. I think sometimes they opened it at Easter, but the rest of the time they weren't running it. So you'd go and the attraction would be closed. And there was a lot of speculation and concern that they were going to dismantle the ride completely and replace it. And then the rumor that popped up for the longest time is when they built the Walt Disney Family Museum in San Francisco. There was a rumor for a long time that it would move out there and become a permanent exhibit at the Walt Disney Family Museum. And that has kind of fallen by the wayside. I don't know that there was ever any actual validity to that other than somebody saying, hey, this would be a great thing to do with it.
Yeah, I think the cost would be highly prohibitive for a museum of that size. To run it, to move it. There was even talk of moving it back to Disneyland after it sort of finished up its run. And I want to say the cost at that point was estimated to be about $16 million. And Disneyland was like, nah, it's not worth it to us.
Leave it there.
Yeah, so I mean, that's the thing. It's not, I mean, although it's beloved to us, and I want to see it until the day I die, it's not an e-ticket attraction, and it would be a massive investment for someone to put it in there. It's also, because it does get steady crowds now at Disney World, both I think from the historical aspect and the fact that Disney World's so crowded all the time now that people just
it's an easy place to go. Yeah,
you can walk on
air
all
conditioned.
the time. Every 4 minutes or 6 minutes or whatever, you can it boards everybody in line. So I think it's probably safe for the time being. I am morbidly curious when they're going to update the final scene, if they're ever going to update the final scene. I mean, you have to think it's eventually going to happen, right, guys?
Well, given all the other changes in the color, I would think it's coming. Or we can just start a rumor that it's going to be chopped into 7 sections, and they'll just add a new one, right? They'll split the unload.
One of the things as we prepare for the episodes, one of the things I thought about is who would be a good sponsor to go in and refocus the attraction, and because, I mean, for me, because, I'm a dorky child of the 70s and 80s. I mean, I would love to see an attraction that actually did the history, just computer technology and technology in the homes in 70s, 80s, 90s, and then the 2000s. I mean, because, JT's a little bit younger than the rest of us, but I mean, it's just a sea change every 10 years in experience in the home. I wouldn't want to lose the historical aspect of the attraction, but something along those lines where another sponsor's coming in and they theme it around that, because of course, as we know, that's the best way to get dollars pumped into it is to find a sponsor.
And it's going to have to be something big like an IBM, an Apple, Google, something like that would come in and do that revamp.
Yeah, Home Depot. Home Depot. So to your point, Brian, I think one of the interesting things that they did when they brought in Gene Shepard is they sort of used that as a launching point and injected a lot of his humor into the show, where before it was very Walt Disney cornball humor. We did have a big change there. They actually lifted sort of sections of Gene Shepard's A Christmas Story and some of his stories and sort of put it into the show. So the blowing of the fuse, for example, and changing the fuses, that was a big part of A Christmas Story. Mentioning things like the Hupmobile, that was all his. In fact, I think there's even a Red Ryder double pump action rifle in the Christmas scene now. Or like Buy the Boys Bed or something.
I want an official Red Ryder Carbine Action 2-inch range ball air rifle.
The next refurb's going to have a leg lamp in that scene.
That's right.
Actually, it'd be great in the 40s scene.
It would be terrific.
The snap of a few sparks, a quick whiff of ozone, and the lamp blazed forth in unparalleled glory.
Oh, look at that! Will you look at that? Isn't that glorious?
So I mean that's a big question. Is like, do you change it? Like, it's been rumored to be pulled out before in the 90s. They showed a flying saucer attraction in that spot, and the Carousel of Progress gone. If there's at one point they're talking about doing that Plecto's Galactic Review, which also didn't happen in Disneyland.
When you look at some of the, and especially the Project Gemini stuff at Epcot that I'm sure we'll cover someday, when you look at all of the goofy unbuilt things that they had on the drawing board in the 90s, thank God Disneyland Paris sucked so much money out of and like everything just stopped in its tracks. I think it may have actually averted like 30 disasters in the parks.
That's true. I mean, I think the thing is, it's cheap enough to run it as is now that it's more cost effective to keep it as it is than it is to go and change it. And because Gene Shepard has now passed away, I think if they're going to make a change, they're going to have to go back and recast it again and start fresh. Which, it's probably time to do it again. I mean, the show as a storytelling device for either selling appliances or talking about the change of society in the 70s and the 80s, or as a fond look back, the way that A Christmas Story was, each one of those things served their time period, and maybe it's time to like put a fresh spin on it.
I was gonna say, we're not talking about a lot of square footage too. The building only has about 20,000 square feet. So if you're gonna do anything, you've got to kick it back into behind where the Tomorrowland stage used to be and all that. That 20,000 square feet is going to become a pre-show of anything in the future unless you build up.
I would also suspect that if they were to redo it, they would probably have a different family in each scene, which would enable them to diversify it a bit, to make it a little more reflective of their audience these days. And change the makeup of some of the families. That would be my guess as to what they would do with the show. Not that I'm one that would prefer not to see any real world. When I go to my parks, I want to put the real world outside, and so I'm not one for tackling the challenges of humanity in my theme parks outside of Epcot in terms of what's possible. But I do think that the Carousel of Progress is a prime candidate to have some diversity added to it.
Yeah.
In terms of how they depict the families.
And we have to figure out what to do, because when the show opened, there was a very clear 20-year gap between each segment. And now the gap between
30 years sounds good.
Yeah, the gap
30,
between
or even 40. Prep it.
1940 and 2016 is probably bigger than the expanse of the entire previous show, right?
What I would like to do is get the Hanna-Barbera, so you could start off with the Flintstones in the first scene, and you could end up with the Jetsons in the last, and then just
wait a minute, wait, whoa, hold on. You just described Spaceship Earth.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, and so there's a note here that the father was updated for the Tomorrowland film. Who has a...
Yeah, so I noticed it. I guess they were filming that movie in I think 2014, the George Clooney movie Tomorrowland, and I rode Carousel of Progress about less than a month after they had filmed there. So they shot some of it at Walt Disney World. If I recall correctly, they did not use any of the footage in the movie. But they did spend several days filming at Carousel of Progress and I think at least one other place. And I noticed, I said, oh my gosh, I've been on the ride every 3 or 4 months or so. And I noticed that the animatronic for the father had been updated. It was brand new skin on it, and the movement seemed to be more fluid. And so it was definitely updated in the first 2 scenes for the filming of Tomorrowland. I don't know if the third one was done or not. It's a little harder to tell because he sits a little further back on the stage in that booth.
Right.
But definitely, absolutely, those animatronics had a makeover. I think they're new animatronics, that they replaced the existing ones that were there, probably with movie budget money.
Right.
In those first 2 scenes. So they were definitely replaced.
All right, and with that, we are going to move on to A Great Big Beautiful Tomorrow.
There's a great big beautiful tomorrow, just a dream away.
Thank you for joining us on Walt Disney's Carousel of Progress. We hope you've enjoyed this tribute to the 1964 Carousel of Progress from the New York World's Fair. Please gather all of your personal belongings and exit through the doors located at the back of the theater. Have a great big beautiful day. And remember, tomorrow is just a dream away.
All right, well, as always, we present a new T-shirt. We do apologize that last month's T-shirt is a little delayed. We had some additional 3D artwork that we put together that helped how visualize the whatchamacallit T-shirt. So how that should just be coming out soon. So we really got almost 2 to talk about this month.
Yes,
right?
I apologize. Finding a good angle on that whatchamacallit from the previous existing photographs was tricky. But thanks to the magic of you and Jason, it's like we got a wonderful 3D model that I could then spin into, find the perfect angle. So now I'm really happy with what we have to work.
So how you've got, it's a blueprint style of the whatchamacallit, right?
Yep.
Okay.
And
that's
very detailed, so that's coming. But then also we have Todd, you mentioned that logo, which I also was fascinated with. So we took that and we added the slogan, "Now is the best time," into the center of it. So I think we have a really nice little piece. And we're running the dates 1970s to 1980s version ran. So it's a little time capsule of that particular version.
That's awesome. So if you want to get these shirts or any of our other merchandise, you can check it out at retrodisneyworld.com/support us. And all the proceeds go to help keeping this show on the air, as well as keeping these different types of merchandise coming to you, and also helping us do some events. And guys, we have an event coming up. We talked about it last month. It's the 2016 Retro Disney World Lake and Lagoon Tour on November 19th and 20th. Tickets went on sale September 25th. You are listening to the show after September 25th. And guys, we sold out quick. The tickets flew.
Yeah, blown away.
Yeah,
I'd like to believe that it is the opportunity to spend time with us and not so much interest in the lakes and lagoons that enticed people to quickly part with $15 for the
right.
privilege.
They want to
They
spend
just
an hour
found
on
a
a boat,
cheap way
locked
to-
on a boat with us.
Cheap way to rent a pontoon boat right here.
It's a boat ride. Who doesn't love a boat ride?
That's right. So we have a full narrated tour coming. We've got all sorts of other goodies planned for that tour that we'll be handing out, and we'll release some of those to the general public as well. Hint, hint. So keep your eyes peeled for those.
And we should note that, we're going to be there Destination D weekend. We're attending the Destination D conference that's down there that weekend. So if you didn't want to come on the boat ride, if you couldn't get a ticket, we're going to be around. We'll certainly be setting up a couple of opportunities to get together and say hello with people and let you know where that's going to be. So if you didn't get in on the boat ride, you'll still have an opportunity to say hey with us.
Exactly. So if we're doing something at night, we'll certainly tweet out. So watch our Twitter feeds.
And I know I'm bringing some stuff to give away to people. So
yep. So we've got some freebies, and
I'm gonna tweet out just like I'm hopping on Carousel of Progress. If you're around, come on and join me.
Thanks to everybody who purchased the tickets. Again, I'm sorry to report it's sold out, but there is a standby list. So if you do go to retrodisneyworld.com/tour. You can certainly put your name on the standby list. And if there's any cancellations or changes, we'll certainly try to get you on. So we'll see everybody.
We're going to need a bigger boat.
That's right.
If you can't make it, please let us know, though. I mean, because there are a lot of people that your spot, I mean, really, these spots, I'm expecting them to go for big bucks on eBay. So if you want to make a profit, you could flip
it's
yours
like
right now.
Front row seats at a Springsteen concert.
Yeah,
that's
right.
The
boss.
That's right. All right, guys, with that, it's time to wrap up. We are going to need to pick a topic for next month. Does anybody have any ideas? We spent some time in the Magic Kingdom recently.
And we were in Epcot recently, too, right?
Yeah, we've been to Epcot. Should we do something completely... I've got ideas. I know I shared a couple.
You do, but I think we should go to a resort. It's been a while since we've done a resort.
This could be, too soon, but in honor of our friend Arnold Palmer, we could do golf resort.
I think that would be very interesting.
Yeah, that would work
because
well.
he was wasn't he one of the main guys that showed up, to back Disney golf in the early days, and
he was pinnacle to getting the tournament going there, and obviously played an important role over golf. So that's an excellent idea. We will take you back to the golf resort, and I know they had a great place to eat over there too. I know it was well chronicled. So thanks to everybody for writing in. If you can give us a shout out on iTunes, if possible, a review there. Appreciate all your questions and comments. As always, you can reach us at podcast@retrodisneyworld.com. And again, thank you for listening. And with that, Brian, take us out.
Follow Todd McCartney and Retro Disney World on Twitter and Instagram @RetroWDW, on Facebook @Retro Disney World. For all things Retro Disney World, including exclusive merchandise, visit us on the web at retrowdw.com. On Twitter, you can find our producer, Jason Bartell from Deepwater Studios @JasonDWS, our announcer, Andre Gardner @Andre Gardner, and follow our hosts, Hal Bowers @GoAwayGreen, for JT Kuzier @LS1JT, and you can find me on Twitter and Facebook @Brian P. Miles.
Queenie, leave him alone.